Here we are with 4J, mixed numbers with renaming. We've done a little bit of this actually when it comes to adding, so that'll be a little bit of a review, but we're going to look at what happens when you have to rename or regroup or borrow when you're subtracting. All right, so let's dive right in here to our first examples. So we've got 3/4 plus 7/8, and we are getting real familiar with the fact that if we've got fourths and eighths, we're going to change these to a common denominator, and 8 will be our common denominator. So if I change 3/4 to eighths, I have to multiply the 4 times 2 and the 3 times 2, do the same thing to both the numerator and the denominator, and so 3/4 is equal to 6/8. So if we go down here and look at our little model, we can say that we've got our 6/8 right here. And then on this model, we've got 7/8, so you can see that if we combine the 7/8 and the 6/8, we're going to be greater than 1 here, and we'll see what to do when that happens. All right, and again, this is a little review. We've seen some like these before. So we're going to add 6/8 plus 7/8, and we know that 6 plus 7 is 13. And our denominator stays the same. We never add our denominator, so that's an 8. And then we know that this is an improper fraction, and to change from an improper fraction to a mixed number, we're going to take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. So 8 divides into 13 one time, and 1 times 8 is 8. Subtract that and we get 5 left over. So a reminder, this is our whole number, this is our new numerator, and that denominator doesn't change, it stays 8. And so we rewrite this. 8 divides into 13 once, with 5 left over, and the denominator is eighths. And so it's 1 5/8. So it would be 1 whole with 5 left over. All right. Now subtracting is a little different. So we've got 4 1/2, and we want to take away 1 7/10. Well, looking at the two fractions, halves and tenths, we know we need a common denominator, and we start listing the multiples of the bigger one until we find one that the smaller one divides into. Of course, the first multiple of 10 is 10 times 1, and of course 2 divides into 10. So we can use 10 as our common denominator. We have to multiply the 2 by 5 and the 1 by 5, and so 1/2 is the same as 5/10. And you can see we've got 4, and we would be taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/10 there. And then we want to subtract 1 7/10. Okay, so I like to stack my fractions like this when I do that. Now we get a problem. We've got only 5/10 over here, and we want to subtract 7/10 out of there, so we don't have 7/10 to subtract. And so we're going to change one of our whole numbers here into tenths as well, so that we can take 7/10 out of it. All right, so we're going to do that by borrowing. So we're going to borrow from the 4, and that will become a 3. Now this 1 that we borrowed, remember that any fraction over itself is equal to 1. So 10 over 10 is equal to 1. So what happens here is when we borrow 1, this is just like a little thought bubble here, okay? When we borrow 1, what's going to happen is we're going to add 10/10 to 5/10. A shortcut way to remember that is just that we're adding the denominator to the numerator, because 10/10 is equal to the 1 that we borrowed. And so we're going to make our new numerator 10 plus 5, or 15. And now we can go ahead, if we have 15 of these tenths, then we can subtract our 7. All right, so taking 7 away from 15 gives us 8/10. And then 3 minus 1 gives us 2. And then, of course, 8/10 can be reduced because both of those can be divided by 2. And we get 2 and 4/5, and that's our final answer. So you can see in our models here the math that we did there. So we wanted to borrow this 1 whole, And then what we did when we borrowed that is we were left with 3 wholes, and we changed that 1 whole that we borrowed into 10 tenths. And we took our 5 tenths that we had and added the 10 tenths to it. So we had this and the 5 tenths that we had up here. And that's where our 15 tenths came from here. So this is a picture of what we did mathematically up here. Sometimes it's nice to see a picture. It makes a little more sense that way. All right, let's look at the inside. So on the inside of your notes, we'll just kind of focus on the adding first. And you can see that we've got some steps here for adding. It says, first we're going to find a common denominator, then we're going to add the whole numbers, and then we're going to add the numerators and keep the denominator the same, and then we're going to simplify. We're going to change any improper fractions to mixed numbers and reduce if we can. All right, so let me give you an example here. So I've got 7 3/4, and I want to add 8 7/12. Look at the two numbers I have. I have 4 and 12. 12 is bigger. I'm going to list the multiples of 12 until I find one that 4 divides into. And of course, I don't have to go very far because 12 times 1 is 12 and 4 divides into 12. So I don't need to change my second fraction at all. It stays 7/12. And my top fraction, instead of 3/4, we're going to name that one, multiply the top and the bottom by 3, 9/12. And now we're ready to add. We want to remember that we're adding here. So 9 and 7 more gives us 16/12. 7 and 8 gives us 15. Your instructions up here say that add the whole numbers first and then add the numerators. You can actually reverse those steps, which I just did. Those steps don't have to be done in that order. They can be done fractions first and then whole numbers. And I kind of like to do the fractions first because you have to do that when you subtract. So I kind of like to be consistent there. Alrighty, now we've got 16/12. So we know we can take that 16/12 and we can change it into a mixed number. Now here's the thing. When we say this fraction, it's 15 and 16/12, and that's exactly what it means. It means that this is 15 plus the fraction. And so we're going to change the 16/12 into a mixed number and add it to the 15. So it's going to become 15 plus, and we're going to take our 16/12, and we'll take 16 and divide it by 12. 12 divides into 16 one time. Subtract and we get 4. So again, here's my whole number, here's my numerator, here's my denominator. So this becomes 1 and 4/12. So 15 plus 1 and 4/12 gives us 16 and 4/12. Now we're not done yet because 4/12 can be reduced to lowest terms, and we can divide both the top and the bottom here by 4, so that finally our answer is 16 and 1/3. Alrighty, I'm going to stop this video and I want you to try these two and then look at the next video and see how you did on those.